Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Christina Wells, and I'm the Health Ministry Director for the Lake Region Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. And today we're going to be having our Cooking Live with Donna class. I am so excited about what we're going to experience for the next couple of hours. Donna is going to be taking us through some cooking recipes live, and I'm sure this is going to be a blessing and enjoyment for all of those who are going to be engaged live and those who also may watch this for the rebroadcast. So please tell others that they can join us today either on the Lake Region Facebook page or on the Lake Region YouTube page. Before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about Donna Green-Goodman. Donna Green-Goodman is a career public health educator. She graduated from Oakwood University and got her master's in public health from Loma Linda University in California. As a 25-year breast cancer survivor, Donna discovered the value of the power of plant foods in preventing and reversing disease. She has authored 3 books on healthy living, Something to Shout About, Cooking Up Good Health, Still Cooking Up Good Health. She is the host and executive producer of the cooking show Cooking Up Good Health, which airs on the Bounce TV Huntsville and Hope TV channel. You can also visit Donna on the Lifestyle Therapeutics YouTube channel. Donna and her husband, a physical therapist, own the Lifestyle Therapeutics, a lifestyle for better health center in Huntsville, where she provides wellness counseling and coaching and cooking classes. You can join her weekly on Instagram for Wellness Wednesdays at 8:30 a.m. Central. So again, we're happy to have Donna with us today. Just a couple of reminders. In the description for the program, if you click on that, you will see the link to all of the recipes for today's program, tomorrow's program, and Friday's program. And also you will see a link to the evaluation for the program. And we really would like for you to fill that out so that we can make sure we're bringing good programs to you in the future. I'll be putting those links in the chat as well. Also, you're going to see a link in the chat for you to be able to access Donna's books. So look for those links. Also, please, please, please share this broadcast so that others can be blessed as well. We're going to say a short prayer, and then we're going to go straight to Donna. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord God, thank you for this day and for this opportunity to be able to stream this live. We ask that you would bless the technology. May it be a blessing to all who hear and all who see. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Welcome, Donna.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you today?
I'm doing good.
Wonderful. I told everyone how great you are and how exciting it's going to be today to see the recipes that you're going to show us live, and also for those who will watch it during the broadcast. And then also I'd let them know that I'll be putting in a link in the chat for your books.
Okay.
And then if anyone has any questions, please feel free to drop them into the chat throughout the program. And without further ado, take it away, Ms. Donna.
Well, I thank you for having me. This is my second week doing lives for camp meeting. I grew up in Allegheny East and South Central conferences. And then most of my professional career, I was in South Atlantic Conference, but I married a man from Lake Region. And Eddie Goodman, the Nunezes, those are all my family. And I'm happy to be able to be with you today. I know that because of the fact that we're using StreamYard, I can't see everybody. Neither do I know who's in the chat. So Dr. Christina has promised that she will ask questions. If you have them, put those in the chat. And if you are a friend of mine, went to school with me, know my husband or anything like that, make sure that you identify yourself so that we can connect as well. What has happened in my conversations with Dr. Christina is that she wanted me to do some plant-based recipes that were easy and tasty. And she was very interested in learning how to make some tofu things. So I'm going to do some tofu stuff today. And you have the recipes. The recipes that you have for today are actually from one of the columns that I wrote for Message Magazine. I write the Optimal Health column in that magazine. And this is one of those that we use then. Then tomorrow, we're going to be working on desserts that you can make. And we're going to do a cheesecake and the toppings to go on the cheesecake and show you some different ways that you can sweeten some things. And then on Friday, we're going to cook Sabbath dinner, macaroni and cheese. And Dr. Christina thought we were doing collards today, so she already has her collards ready, but we're going to do that on Friday. I am happy that you're here with me. I'm going to get behind the table and get started. Today, we're going to make a lasagna. We're going to make something called a tofu loaf is what I call it. But if you grew up around this culture, you are familiar with a cottage cheese loaf. And when I was a teenager, and then when I went to grad school, I spent some time with some friends who became like family to me, the Bedney family. And Mrs. Bedney made some of the best cottage cheese loaf. And that was something that I missed when I started eating plant-based. And so I created that or recreated it. I'm going to show you how to do that today. Then I'm going to show you how to just make some plain old tofu. And we're going to make a tofu egg salad. And if you're cooking along with me, shoot your questions into the chat and she will pass those on to me. And we're good to go. I'm not sure that I'll be here the whole full 2 hours, but I know that if there are questions that you need answered, I definitely want to respond to those. If there's a topic that I can talk about, I'd be happy to do that as we talk about that as well. So let me get back here to where the food is and we can get started. One of the things that Dr. Christina mentioned to me when she and I first started talking about doing this project was that she wanted me to also talk about the value of consuming beans. And for many of us, black-eyed peas, pinto beans, lima beans, any kind of bean over rice. I can remember going to my great-grandmother and auntie's house when I was a child eating those. My husband absolutely loves them. And we're discovering in medicine and healthy living that beans are very, very good for you to eat. We understand the fact that they are gassy, and there's some things that you can do to make them less gassy, washing them off, soaking them and pouring the water off, cooking them with ginger in there. Some people say baking soda, but baking soda kills vitamins, so I don't necessarily recommend that. But what they're discovering with beans is that because they are so high in fiber, they are excellent as a food to eat, especially if you're diabetic, pre-diabetic, because of the way God has created them. The way they break down in the system helps to curb your sugar levels. And that's something that you really want to do. It doesn't matter what kind of bean you're eating. If it's a bean, it's something that can help. So it's high in fiber, it's high in iron. And one of the things that I learned about after, I was raised in this culture doing all this plant-based eating, but I was lacto-vegetarian. And it wasn't until my diagnosis with breast cancer that I decided to go fully plant-based. And when I decided to go fully plant-based, I discovered something called phytochemicals that was not taught. I minored in nutrition at Oakwood, and we didn't learn about phytochemicals when we were there. Did some research with Dr. Guebu, but I never learned about this. So years later, in '96, when I was diagnosed and I was looking at the value of a plant-based diet and helping to beat my breast cancer, I came across a study that was done by the National Cancer Institute, and this doctor, Herb Pearson, was investigating these chemicals that he had found inside of plant foods and how they impacted cancer specifically, but other diseases as well. So in addition to being an excellent source of protein and fiber, and a really good source of iron. I believe last week I was sharing with somebody that black-eyed peas are one of the highest sources of plant iron that you can get. They also have these phytochemicals that God placed in the beans to protect the beans and the greens and the callaloo and the rice and all the other plant foods, garlic, onions, bell peppers. And then when you eat the foods and digest them, those same substances are released in your body and they work to keep you healthy. And so we're not even sure of how many phytochemicals that there are in the beans, but so many are there and they're still discovering them. And whatever bean you eat is going to be beneficial. So what I'm going to do while we're making this other stuff is just put a pot of beans on, and I've already washed off about a pound of black-eyed peas, and I'm going to put them in here in my Instant Pot. And I discovered that Dr. Christina loves the Instant Pot too. And then what I'm going to do is add some more water, which is about 4 cups or so, to cover the beans. And these are beans that can cook quickly because they're such a small bean or pea. Usually when you used to cook this years ago outside of a plant-based diet, you would put ham hock in there, maybe some salt and pepper. But what I like to add when I'm cooking the beans literally is a substance called bacon, which is like a smoke smell. And I add some bacon to it. And then my husband and son weren't crazy about eating onions and bell peppers on their tongue. So I used to put a whole onion in my beans. But what I do now is add garlic powder. And I'm going to add some onion powder. And then for these beans, I like to put a bay leaf in there as well. And sometimes some basil. We live out in the country on 5.5 acres of land. And my husband loves to garden. And so we have fresh basil and thyme and rosemary, peppermint, dill, a bunch of stuff out there that we could get fresh if it was going to be an ingredient in this. But today all I'm going to do is add a bay leaf. I'm trying to find a good size one that I can add here. Okay, drop a bay leaf in. And then y'all, that's all I'm going to do right now. I have discovered that when you're cooking like this, if you leave your salty ingredients out until the food is done, then you get to see what the food actually tastes like. And then you can add other seasonings. So I'm also going to add a bouillon, a chicken bouillon to this, but I'm not going to add it till they're done. So they're in here. I'm going to put these in my Instant Pot. I'm going to cover the pot. I'm going to set it for sealing. And I'm going to turn it on for 20 minutes, or 60 minutes, I'm sorry. And of course, I like to put my black beans in here too. But what I have learned is I like them a little softer than the standard recipes. And I really like to have a thicker broth. So what I have done recently is soak them for a little while. And then I turn it on and let it cook for about 60 minutes. And then they're absolutely perfect. So that's how we do that. The other reason that I decided to do that was because there's such a bad feeling about using soy. And soy is nothing but another bean that God has made. And it is part of, an integral part of Asian culture, just the same way that black-eyed peas and pinto beans are an integral part of African-American Southern culture. How green beans are an integral part of American culture, red beans in the Caribbean and down in New Orleans. It's just a bean. All it is a bean. The only thing that you might be concerned about is whether it is organic or genetically modified. But if you can find an organic, non-GMO source of soybean, you do not have to worry about anything. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, one of the things that I discovered was for AIDS patients, the soybean acts as if it is a protease inhibitor, which is one of the categories of drugs that they give them. And then they wanted me to do tamoxifen so that the estrogen that was floating around in my blood would not go back to the breast and cause more problems. And there are some substances, phytochemicals in soy that did the same thing. So I decided to forego tamoxifen and use the soy instead. And so what we're going to do today is show you how to use some different things to make using tofu. And all tofu really is the beans that are cooked down. Because people will see tofu and it's like, I'm not eating that stuff. It's just not going to work. What they do is they actually take the soybean, they soak it maybe 6 or 8 hours. Overnight is probably the best way to do it. And then in the morning, they take it and they put it in the blender with some water and blend it up. That's the way that you make plant milk. You can do it with soy. You can do it with rice. You can do it with almonds. You can do it with oats. And after they've mixed it up really well until it's smooth, then they put it in the pot and they cook it. And there's this pulpy stuff that comes to the top and foam, and you take that off. And after it has cooked, then you're going to take this stuff, drain it, and you're going to put it in cheesecloth and squeeze it together so that it forms. Of course, you add a coagulant to it. And once that is done, you end up with something that's called water-packed tofu, or you have silken tofu, which is in an aseptic package. The water-packed tofu is what I'm featuring today. And this literally is something that has the consistency of cottage cheese. This one, the silken one, is more like cream cheese. in its texture, and it's a lot softer. And I use these more for like the cheesecake that we're going to make tomorrow. Sometimes I put it in ice cream. Sometimes I'll make a salad dressing out of it. And one of the challenges is when you find out that tofu is good for you and you decide, okay, I'm going to eat some of that. You're trying to prepare this when it comes out of the container, and you really don't have anything to connect it to other than what you have heard about in Asian communities or Asian culture. And so what I did was to figure out a way to utilize it because it was beneficial to me in African American culture or foods that African Americans traditionally ate. And one of those things, which ain't really African American, is Italian, is your lasagna. So what I'm going to do is just take 1 pack of this tofu right here, and I'm going to pour the water off. There are schools of thought that are very consistent about draining the tofu. You can if you like, but usually by the time I decide I'm going to use something like this, I don't have time to do that. So I usually don't drain the tofu. I usually just pour the water off. But if you wanted to make it drier, you literally could take it and stick it between some plates or something that could squeeze the extra water out, and the water would be gone. So I'm going to
ask a question. What about freezing the tofu in advance?
They took the words out of my mouth. The reason that you would freeze tofu is if you want to change the texture of it. This right here is really crumbly, just like if you had some ricotta cheese maybe, or a cottage cheese that wasn't creamy cottage cheese. And if you want to keep this texture, because essentially what we're doing is making a ricotta out of this to go inside of the lasagna. So if you take it and freeze it, it just changes the texture altogether, making it more meaty. And that's really good if you want to make some tofu, fried tofu out of it, or fish sticks out of it. Or if you wanted to drop it into a soup or stew, or make like tofu meatballs out of it, then it'll have a meatier texture. I recommend that if that's something that you want to do. Yesterday, as I was preparing for this class, I went by the Asian market, which is the best place to buy any of this because the price is better. They use it, so it's fresh. And when I buy it, I usually buy 6 to a dozen at a time. And I'll keep some in the refrigerator for us to use for dishes like this. And then sometimes I will freeze packages. And I find that if it's in the freezer at least a week, no less than a week, but at least a week, it gets frozen thoroughly. One of the ladies who works at our office, Miss Garney, makes a fried tofu dish, and she freezes hers twice. She freezes it and thaws it, and then freezes it again before she batters it up and fries it. So that's an option for you too. Just know that if you freeze it, it's going to change the texture. So if you wanted to use this as your ground beef in your lasagna and make it ricotta, I would probably just use the tofu as I have taken it out of the container like this, and I'm going to show you how to do the ricotta. But then I would take the frozen one and grind it up and season it like beef, and then you could use that as your beef in your spaghetti sauce if that's what you were going to do. So that's an option as well. Hope that answers that question. Okay, so to this I'm going to add some salt. And I usually use the pink salt, but I'm out of it. And I'm going to put some lemon juice in here to give it that cottage cheesy flavor. What we tend to do is I buy bags of lemons from like Costco or Sam's. And then we juice them so that I have fresh lemon juice that doesn't have all of the sulfites and stuff in there that you would find in the store-bought lemon. And then I'm going to add some salt. And the thought just occurred to me. Another thing that I like to add to this to make it creamy is sometimes the sour cream. So I'm going to get some of that. I'm going to put a little salt in here. And you play with the salt to get it where you want it to taste. Let me see if I have some sour cream in here that I can add. That's going to make this smooth. I promise you it's here. Yes. Okay, when I start started eating like this years ago. Tofutti was the best brand of sour cream and cream cheese. There are a bunch of other ones on the market now. Here in Alabama, where we live, Kroger makes their own version of it, and that's an option too. So if you wanted to have, I don't know how well you can see this, so I'll bring it to the camera for you. But that's it, just crumbled up. And you could use it just like this, but I'm going to add cream cheese, sour cream to it.
Now, what does the sour cream add for it?
You can buy cottage cheese in the grocery store that is creamed cottage cheese, large curd or small curd. And when you look at the creamier one, it has a creamier texture to it. So that when you put it in the lasagna, it spreads a little better than if you just have all these crumbles. Make sense?
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I really came up with this one day because it reminded me of the cottage cheese that my mom would make us eat when we were kids. I didn't really like dairy growing up, but my mother was at the place where she was mothering, and you know mothers do what they do. And she made us eat cottage cheese and sour cream. Turns out, years later, we discovered how harmful cottage cheese and sour cream are to the body. But there are some tastes and textures that you remember. And so I was making lasagna one day, and I decided, you know what? I'm going to make some sour cream and add that to this. Another way to do this would, of course, be to blend up some tofu on its own. Or if you don't use any of these products, you could probably add some blended cashews to this so that you're getting this creaminess like what I have now. The sour cream adds the creaminess. The salt gives the saltiness of your traditional cottage cheese or ricotta. And the lemon gives it that twang. Now, Violife is one of the brands of cheese that I use, and they make a ricotta, I believe, as well now. Okay, I'm going to come back over to the camera so that you can see the difference in it. And that's how it looks now that the creamy is in there. And when you season it right, folks can't tell the difference. That's the best thing about this. Okay, so we have the ricotta ready now. What I'm going to do next is make the filling. And what I like to do is easy. I understand that people are in different places on their journey, and I've had experience doing all the variations of it. There are some people who are purists and only want to use everything that's absolutely fresh, non-GMO, no processing. And then there are people who are living in food deserts and finally got a chance to get something from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to help them make what they can make with that. And so the sauce that I'm going to make, I discovered my husband likes Prego, so I use a jar of Prego, and then I add about a jar of water to the sauce because I'm not going to boil my pasta noodles before I make the lasagna. And when I add some more water to it, that's going to help to cook up the lasagna noodles. So I add that water, and then I add my filling. If you want to have a beefy filling, you can use some of your veggie meat. Now there are so many options that are available to you that you can use. Today I'm using Gardein, which is one of my favorite as far as veggie meat is concerned. I'm probably going to put about half the bag in there. If you don't like using veggie meat, this is when you could add vegetables to this: broccoli, carrot, spinach. I like to recommend to people that they use things that are familiar to their culture. So a lot of recipes that call for spinach, I will use collards or kale instead, and sometimes callaloo. Next, what I'm going to do is add a little veggie sausage to it. And this one is by Gimme Lean. And I think what I'm going to do is just dump it in here and mash it up against the side of the bowl, because this literally comes in this big chunk compared to the other. For this one, I'm not using any oil at all. So for people who are oil-free, you'll be happy with that. For the next dish, I am going to use some oil. And again, that is a personal preference. The advantage of no oil is that you're cutting down a whole lot on calories. I don't use a lot of oil, but I like the taste of the oil, especially the olive oil that it brings to some of the dishes that I make. So I'm going to mash this veggie sausage in here, so it's going to have a meaty, sausagey kind of flavor. And then I'm going to season this. And we had a little basil in the garden the other day. I didn't go out and get any this morning. But if you wanted to, now would be a time to put in your fresh basil, fresh oregano, fresh garlic if you wanted to add that, and any other seasonings that you like. I really like basil in my lasagna, so that's what I'm going to do. All right, so I'm going to add more onion powder. Because again, I'm not putting fresh onion and bell pepper in this. I'm going to be heavy on the garlic because my husband absolutely loves garlic. And of course, we all know how beneficial that is to the body across all body systems to fight disease. And it's especially good as we are facing COVID and building the body's immune system. Then I'm going to add basil, which is my fave. And you put as little or as much as you like. And this would be a good time to add Italian seasoning if that's what you wanted. But when you use the fresh basil, nothing beats the flavor, the scent of that. You're getting all the fresh oils when you're mixing it. It's absolutely delicious. Okay, so now I'm going to stir this up. And when you go to the grocery store, they have now started to market noodles that are bake ready. Don't pay no extra money for that. Just go on and get the dollar box because they have not done anything extra to it. It literally is something that they're using to market. They may have cut them a little smaller to fit in your dish, but that's all it is. You could also add mushrooms to this if you want to. Whatever you want is what you can add. And if you have children that you're trying to get to eat vegetables, this would be a good time to add this to the sauce too. Now, if you don't want to use the commercial sauces, last summer what we did was to get a bunch of different tomatoes, red tomatoes, purple tomatoes, and yellow tomatoes. And I made my own spaghetti sauce or basic like Italian sauce that could go several different ways. And if you have access to where you can get your own stuff, then you can do that. And then you'll be able to use your own. And it really, several times over the winter time, we've opened up a couple jars of this. We did this and we made jelly and we canned salsa and we made applesauce. And it's nothing like reaching into your pantry and pulling out a jar of something like this from last summer where you know every single thing that's in there you put in there and is good for you. So that's the other option if indeed you don't want to do this. Or if you want to just make up some spaghetti sauce as you're making it, that's another option for you too. Any more questions, Dr. Christina?
None right now.
Okay.
It looks great so far.
All right, so here we go. If you want to, you can put a little sauce on the bottom. Don't have to, but you can if you want to. Spread that there. And then you get your box of noodles. And I'm using Barilla, which is a whole grain noodle. If you are allergic to gluten, you probably wouldn't want to use these because they contain gluten, but there are a number of gluten-free products that are on the market. One of our patients is supposed to be watching us now, and she is gluten allergic. So she's the one who's taught me how to access a lot more of this to meet her needs. So you could do that, and those are made from things like corn and rice and oats and sometimes vegetables. There's 1 gram that makes stuff out of garbanzo beans. So that's an option for you as well. Then we're going to take some more sauce and pour it. This time about half the sauce is left. Spread that. And the first time that I introduced this to the lady that worked at our office, she's like, there ain't no way that's going to work, Donna. Like, trust me, I wouldn't let you down. What I want to make sure is that you don't have to do a whole lot when you're making better choices, because that's what keeps people from doing it. Now we're going to take about half of this homemade ricotta and add that to it. And then we can spread that out. And if you want more, then of course you would need to double it. But this is plenty. We homeschooled our son when he was a child. And one of the things that we did during that time was home economics. And so he got in the kitchen with me and I taught him how to make a lot of stuff like this. And he is proficient when it comes to making this dish. We got to the place where we didn't make it. We just let him make it all the time. Okay, now if you want to, you can sprinkle more garlic here. You could put more cheese here if you want to. We usually just save our cheese for the top. Second row of noodles. I need to open some more.
Did you say you didn't cook the noodles?
I'm not cooking the noodles.
Thanks.
Not at all. Okay, that goes in. I need to break this to fit on the side. Then I'm going to put more sauce.
Now, what other things, while you're doing that, what other things could you use besides noodles?
To make this with?
Yeah, could you use like eggplant or zucchini?
But my mind went to eggplant. It also went to squash, if that's what you want to do. If you didn't want to do any of this at all, and if it's a preference, fine. But I don't want you to leave here thinking that it's bad to eat wheat and grains, because that is a food group that God made for us because it has so many wonderful benefits to us. And the current and popular thing that you shouldn't eat wheat and all that, that's not scientifically sound. If you don't want to use it and just want to try some other things, yes, doing things like eggplant and squash, summer squash, yellow squash, and slicing them thinly and layering it that way is an excellent way to do a vegetable, totally vegetable lasagna. And of course, you can also take those same things and spiralize them and use them as spaghetti. So yeah, good question. All right, now it's time to put the cheese on top. And if you are new to eating plant-based, you don't know what kind of cheese you're supposed to get. Here we go. 25 years ago when I started doing this, it wasn't hardly nothing out there on the market that you could eat that acted like cheese. They had some stuff that tasted like cheese, but it did not act like cheese. And in the last 25 years, they have come a long, long way. I have some brands in front of you that I have been using and that I recommend. I'm going to walk through that so that you can see them. This is the Violife brand, and this is the brand that my husband believes now is the best cheese, plant-based ever. I find all the varieties of this brand at Whole Foods. So Whole Foods is a store that you can find nationwide. This is Parmesan that you can grate, and this is mozzarella shreds. The other brand that I like to use is Follow Your Heart. Follow Your Heart, this is Parmesan shreds here, and it also comes in a bag of mozzarella and cheddar. And then they also make some really, really good sliced cheese, Gouda, American, Swiss, provolone that you can get at the grocery store too. Walmart has begun to make some cheeses that are plant-based, and this is the mozzarella. I have not tried it yet, but they make mozzarella and cheddar, and I have found those in Walmart in the section where the eggs and the cheese are. It's not in a special section. If you have all these near you, all these also makes a really good mozzarella cheese, and I'm going to use some of that today. And then Daya makes some cheese that is called your cutting board collection. And I really like Daya because it has a pulliness to it that some of the other cheeses do. So experiment with the kind that you like. Today I'm going to use a combination of several that my family enjoys. I'm going to use some of this Parmesan because I like the cheesiness and the pulliness of it. One of the things that happens when you start to eat plant-based cheeses, you know, people will turn it down. I don't like that stuff because it don't taste like cheese. Well, it can taste like cheese because it's not cheese. It is a cheese alternative. And the reason it doesn't taste like cheese, I'm using some of the Violife mozzarella now. The reason it doesn't taste like cheese is because it does not have the fat that is in cheese, which we are forbidden to eat in Leviticus, nor does it have the sodium. All animal products are extremely high in sodium. So a person, for instance, who has hypertension, the first thing that they tell you is to get off salt and make sure that you're using other things to season your food with, which is very, very good. However, they don't tell you to stop eating animal products, which is the primary source of sodium in the American diet. There is more sodium in a a bag of a cup of milk than it is in a little bag of potato chips. And you know how much sodium is in a bag of chips. So when you're making dishes like this, it's not going to taste the same because the components aren't there. I always tell people when we make the mac and cheese on Friday, you'll see me use some salt. Add a little salt to it, it'll bring the flavor right up and you won't even miss the other. This is the Earth Grown from Aldi, and its texture is totally different from everything that's on here. And it's really good. And then I'm going to end with some Parmesan cheese because I really just like the Parmesan flavor of this one. Any more questions?
No,
Okay.
sounds good. And thank you for mentioning about the wheat as well.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, there's so many other alternatives out there now that you can find something for everybody that's also good for you. You just want to stay away from the stuff that's enriched and processed, for sure.
Right. Now, what do you think about I think it's the Mikos?
Mikokos?
Mikokos, yes.
Yeah, I tried hers, and it's okay. I prefer these. I really have begun to try all of them because I do this for a living, and I want to be able to say what this one tastes like or the other one tastes like. And Miyoko's is a little more expensive.
Right.
And so if that's where you are on the spectrum and you can afford it, then get you some Miyoko. But if you're on the other end of the spectrum, and I'm finding now a lot of our patients are coming in and saying, I found this at Dollar Tree, Ms. Goodman, or I found this at Dollar General, then get that. And then Walmart always has a lower cost on whatever plant-based cheeses are there. I know recently they've been carrying at our Walmart the Follow Your Heart shredded cheeses and the slices. Yes. So it depends on what you like.
Sounds good.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is cover this. I'm going to use foil. It's not going to touch it because it's down inside the dish. But if you are anti-foil, then you need to make in a container that has a glass dish, or you can put some parchment paper between the foil and the dish, and we're going to put it in the oven. The thing with plant-based cheese is it has a totally different melting point than dairy cheese does. So I never suggest that you make one of these dishes using this kind of cheese and just pop it in the oven and expect it to do what dairy cheese does, because it's not going to do it. You need to cover it. Cover a dish that has plant-based cheese in it when you bake it in the oven. And when it's about done, you can take the top off and it'll be good and melty. And then you can turn on your broiler and broil it. And then that will make it look like the traditional stuff that you're used to eating. Does that make sense to y'all? This is going in the oven and we're good. Probably going to bake that for about 45 minutes to an hour. And what you can do is just take a fork and stick it down in there. And the noodles will be nice and tender. And you can pull it out and brown it if that's what you want to do. I was making some mac and cheese the other day, and my cousin's like, if you want to, you can add a little paprika to the top of it, because that's something in our culture that we do to make stuff brown as well. Any questions about the lasagna? Always let it sit. Once it's come out of the oven, it'll be easier to cut that way. And if you are working with the food ministry at the church, introduce this stuff to the parishioners whenever we get back to worship. Don't have us in the sanctuary shouting, praising God for healing, and then bring them downstairs for dinner and serve them death. That's not what we want to do. And if you play around with the ingredients, you can make it so that it tastes really good. I taught in Oakland for about 8 years, had students over my house, and one student was from New Orleans, and he's like, Miss Goodman, you can't make no gumbo like what they make in New Orleans. And so I made some gumbo, and he came over, and he's like, okay, Miss Goodman, that's pretty good. Yeah. And so it's really just experimenting with seasonings until you get it where you want, because what you're trying to do is serve up health and not death. Okay. Next, we're going to make this cottage cheese loaf. Oh, that is so, so good. And what I'm going to do is turn on this oil. This is one of the recipes that I do use oil in. You don't have to use oil if you don't want to use oil. If that's not what you do, Don't use oil. And I'm going to saute some onions and bell peppers. And I just have this personal preference when I'm making a dish to look at the colors that I'm putting in the food. And when I slice up my cottage cheese loaf, I want to see the little colors throughout it. So that's why I've chosen the red, the orange, the yellow, and the green. But if it doesn't matter to you, then you don't have to use it. I've used yellow onion, but if you like red onion, or if you like Vidalia onions, you can use that. Or if you wanted a white onion, you could do that. And I'm just going to saute this to get the flavor into the oil and get them a little soft. I'm also going to chop up some mushroom. And there's always a lot of controversy about whether you should use mushroom or not because they're fungus. This is an edible fungus. And we are finding that there is so much benefit in this, especially as a cancer survivor, as to how they can improve my health. I don't know if you know, Dr. Christina, that there's some information that has come out recently that says that you can literally sit these in the sun and they'll absorb the vitamin D because there's no real natural occurrence of vitamin D in food. And I was surprised to learn that. And so this is where you can get it if indeed they've been exposed to the sun. So I'm going to add this to that, wash them off, and then I'll add them to the onions and bell peppers. Cottage cheese loaf is kind of like a standard Sabbath dish in this community. And when I would eat at the Veggie house, they would have it with gravy and mushrooms, and it was just so good. And so this is a way to have a meatloaf. And many of you may know that when the Seventh-day Adventist Church began, that's where all this veggie meat and stuff came from, as options for people who were converting and learning how to eat less of all the processed stuff. And so some of us grew up with new meat and all that stuff that was in the can. Some of it was frozen food, the fry sticks, whatever. And then some of our moms taught us how to make these kinds of loaves, they were calling it back then, and how to make gluten as well from scratch. And this is the healthier version of those things. This recipe calls for nuts. You don't have to use nuts if you don't want to. And if you don't like mushrooms, you don't have to use mushrooms either. It is, again, personal preference. A lot of times in our culture, we'll make a meatloaf and it'll have barbecue sauce or ketchup on top of it. If that's what you want to do with this, you could do that too. But the key to this one is Special K, and that's why it was called the Special K loaf. I'm in some groups on Facebook, and some of those groups cater to this type of cooking. And there's so many varieties of the cottage cheese loaf. It's just amazing. Okay, so that's chopped. And I'm going to add this to these veggies. And they're really just going to wilt. And if you decide to make any of this stuff at home, as you're doing it, just take a minute to inhale it because the aromas are just glorious. My mother actually gave me a tip when I was a young woman. She's like, if you get home a few minutes before your husband does and there's nothing in the kitchen, cut you up some onions and bell peppers and put them on the stove. And it really does make a difference. Okay, so for this one, we're going to take another pack of tofu and put it in the bowl. And this is going to be like your cottage cheese. Usually when I do this, I don't add all the lemon and everything to it. I just mash it up. But I guess I could. Because the cottage cheese that I used to use had all that stuff in it. So why don't I do that for you today? So that's going to make it real creamy. And when you're doing tofu, you can mash it like this. You can slice it. You can cube it. And then I'm going to show you another technique for making the scramble tofu that's really good. Okay, so I'm going to pretend like this is cottage cheese. I'm going to add a little more salt to it. And I'm going to add some. This is not in the recipe, so make a note of this. I just decided to do this right now. And I'm going to add a little more lemon juice. So it's pretty much like what we put in the lasagna. veggies down. Okay, so we'll get this stirred. And then you start just dumping in all the other ingredients. Literally, that's all you do. Years ago, a lot of the homemade veggie meats were primarily made. I think like now, quinoa and couscous are real popular. Back then, we were using Special K and wheat. Weetabix, I think, is the name of the one from years ago. Oats and rice a lot to form the basis. And that would give you fiber, but it also had protein and lots of B vitamins if it was a grain. Okay, so for this recipe, it calls for the cottage cheese. I have the olive oil, the bell pepper, and the mushrooms together. It calls for grape nuts and pecan meal, and then we're going to season it. So what I'm going to do now, I have a box of Special K. The recipe says grape nuts or Special K because when I switched to an all plant-based diet, the Special K had added dairy. It didn't have dairy when I was a kid, but they added dairy. So I decided I wasn't going to use that. And I found grape nuts work just as well. You could probably find another grain that you could use as well. But recently, they've taken it out. So I'm back to using Special K, so it's legitimately a Special K loaf. This is a family-sized box, and this is about 3 to 4 cups that's left over here in half the bag. So I'm going to dump that in. That easy. And the reason I like to do it like that is because once I pour these hot veggies on top of it, that's going to help this to soften and make it easier to stir. So we have that in there. And now what I'm going to do is add the veggies. This is onions, bell pepper, and mushrooms. Now, in your traditional recipes, although they were meat-free, they were not dairy and egg-free. And what they used to use was eggs in here. That can be a challenge if you're used to cooking with eggs. But for something like this, what I decided to do was just leave all the eggs out. And I played with the liquid that I added, which was plant-based milk, until it got to the consistency that I wanted. What is available now is the Just Egg. Are you all familiar with that, Dr. Christina? Does everybody use Just Egg?
You know, I've used Just Egg, and sometimes I like it, and sometimes I don't like it.
Okay.
But I am familiar with it.
All right. Well, this is available if a person just thinks they have to have egg to go in something. You could also make flax egg. And very recently, I have been using garbanzo bean juice. I made a carrot cake for my husband last weekend for Father's Day, and I used garbanzo bean juice as the egg replacer. So there are a number of things. What you're trying to do is incorporate a liquid into it so that it'll have this moistness that you're used to having. So this is an option if you want to use it. The other thing that I'm adding is pecans meal. The recipe calls for pecan meal. And if you don't have pecan meal, don't go to the store to buy it. Take you some pecans, put them in a little blender, and blend them up. And there's your pecan meal. If you don't like nuts or are allergic to nuts, then you don't have to put this in here at all. I prefer walnuts. I just like the way they taste. And walnuts are, especially the English walnuts, black walnuts, are a really good source of your omega-3 acids, fatty acids, which are good for everything. So you can use that as well. Then you take a nice big spoon and you start stirring around like you did for the lasagna sauce. Where did I put it? There it is. Okay, so now we're going to start stirring. And it's still nice and piping hot, so it's softening things as I stir. And as you stir this and add your seasonings to it and the milk, it's going to soften up and start to look a lot more like a meatloaf. Right now, it just looks like cereal with some onions and bell peppers in. Okay? So to season this, I'm going to add some McKay's chicken style, maybe some Bragg's, some sage, and some garlic powder. And if you like to add a brown color to it, there's some browning sauce that you can add to it as well. If you are Caribbean in nature, you want to use a coconut milk. I'm going to use oat milk in this. The recipe calls for a plain soy milk. But recently, my husband has discovered oat milk. And let me tell you, he thinks it tastes the closest to milk that he's had in 25 years. And he really loves it. So I'm using that. It has a different flavor and texture than some of the other milks do. And so I'm going to use that instead of the soy milk. And then what I like to do now is add my seasoning.
I agree with your husband. That oat milk, especially that brand you have there, is very tasty, and it also is it's more naturally sweet without a sweetener.
Yeah.
So it is really nice.
And then for people, Dr. Christina, who don't want to use any of the commercial milks, you can use some rice or oats and put it in the blender and blend it up.
Right.
And put your milk. Then you don't have to worry about that. And that to me gives everybody an option, because some people are too busy. You know, I love cooking. I will get in the kitchen and I'll stay here all day long. And I don't understand how a person doesn't. Well, I understand how many they may not want to cook, but I just enjoy it so much. And to make stuff from scratch in the kind of world that we live in now, it's a little more challenging. So if you can use what's already prepared, use that. But if you are the type who wants to do it yourself, then do it yourself. Okay, so it's getting wetter now. And now it's time to add the seasonings. Let's add some garlic. And your seasonings in this are to taste. There are no measurements for it. Then there's a McKay's chicken style seasoning. You want to look for the one that has vegan on it so that you're clear there's no dairy products in there. So I'm going to add some of that. And there's another one. Let me see if that's in the refrigerator. I can show you. That is another option for people who can't get to McKay's chicken style seasoning. You're here by yourself. You just got to do it all. Okay. So I don't know if any of you have seen the Better Than Bouillon. This is the roasted garlic one. And the ones that you find in the grocery store are mostly the chicken and chicken and beef, I think, and maybe a turkey. But some stores actually sell the one that is not chicken and not beef, and that's delicious. And that's another option that you can use if you can't get McKay's, because McKay's is something that is cultural for us, and it's often sold in the ABCs. So that's another option for you to use to get that bouillon flavoring. Okay, and there's one more item. All right, so now I'm going to add some brags, a couple squirts. And then if you want to brown it some, you can use Kitchen Bouquet, which is a good browning sauce. Anytime you're making a gravy, that's always good to use. Just a couple drops though, or it'll turn everything really dark. Okay. And then I'm going to add some sage to this. And any other herbs and spices that you like. When I lived in Atlanta, we were able to shop at the DeKalb Farmers Market and get such good deals on spices. And that's how you were able to experiment with so many different ones. This is powdered sage. And like I said, we have sage growing out on the patio, so you can also use that too. Just get it in and probably saute it with your veggies before you put them in there. All right, so now we're going to stir again. And what you have done is given this a chance to get soft. So you might not have to add as much liquid to it to get it to where you want it to be. Have you ever made this before, Dr. Christina?
I have not made the vegan version. And so I made the real version, but that was years ago. So hopefully you'll be able to share your recipe with us so I can make this one, because my mother used to make the real version and it was so wonderful. And I've been looking for a vegan version.
Honey, it's like Sabbath. That's what it is. You go looking for it. And when I was at Loma Linda, you know, I'm in Sabbath Centerville, and we would go sometimes on Sabbath to Loma Linda Church. and they would have potlucks, and all the community people and members and everything would bring it. Okay, so now I'm pouring some of this. And the interesting thing about this oat milk is that it's a little thinner looking than your soy and your almond milks are, but it acts like milk. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And we're gonna let this stand for a couple minutes so that it can soak up some of this liquid. So when we would go to church at Loma Linda's church, the university church, we stay after dinner for the potluck. And they have these loaves, man. It would be so good. And then sometimes they make patties out of them. That would be good too. Okay, we're gonna let this stand a couple minutes while it's soaking this up. Any questions at all about anything?
No, I think we're doing good. It looks good. Making me hungry.
That's what everybody says, Donna. I did this for another group earlier this year here in Huntsville. And they're like, I'm coming out. We're going to do a drive-by so we can pick up our plate. I'm like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, what are you going to do with all the food that you're cooking?
What am I going to do with it all?
Yes.
Well, what happens is, one of the things that we wanted to make available for our patients is ways for them to embrace healthier behaviors. So before COVID, I was doing a cooking class every week at the clinic. And some of our older patients, some of our non-Black patients wouldn't come back out at night. So what we decided to do was every day we sample something that is plant-based for them. We have a patient now who's facing some real health challenges. And he's been coming with his mom and his wife or sister, I think. And this week we are sampling blueberry, pineapple, and banana smoothies made with coconut milk. And then today and tomorrow we're doing veggie wraps on tortillas with like a hummus mix and some lettuce and tomato and cucumber in a wrap. Last week, I forget what we did last week, but every day we sample something. So literally the patients will get to taste this and then they'll see how good it tastes. And what the patients are saying so far this week is that the food tastes so clean. And when you have patients that are coming to your clinic for physical therapy because they have diabetic neuropathy or they've had cancer like I have and maybe have taken chemotherapy and are experiencing neuropathy, or they have scarring or have had a stroke, we're teaching them that these are the things that contributed to that. And so we want you to eat more plant-based. We want you to exercise. We want you to get outdoors and get the sunlight and fresh air and use hydrotherapy and go to bed on time and keep the Sabbath and all those sorts of things, because that's the way the Creator designed us. And we're watching people's cholesterol levels drop, get off medications, weight be reduced. We're saving people's limbs. Tumors are shrinking as people are not only being told, but being shown that this is better. The first miracle in the Bible I like to talk about is where Jesus did that miracle, turning the water into wine. And when he did it, everybody said, this is better. Where have you been keeping the good stuff? And so we say that if you're eating healthier and it's not really good to you, then you're sitting at the wrong table. So we're going to let our patients taste it.
Great. That sounds good. You know, that's exactly like the type of thing that I try to get my patients to eat, especially like the diabetics in terms of beans. That's why I wanted you to do some beans recipes. I mean, talk about beans and plant-based things. There's a question, another question though. And the question is, do you like to use Vital Wheat gluten?
Yeah, I use Vital Wheat gluten. There's a recipe on our YouTube page. Our YouTube is Lifestyle Therapeutics, and there's a recipe on there, Auntie Donna's vegan fried chicken. Vital Wheat gluten is the gluten that's already been extracted and dried out for you. You don't have to do all the work. And so you just are literally adding liquid to it, seasonings to it, and letting it cook, compared to mixing up that 5 pound flour, adding the water to it, kneading it, washing away the starch, ending up with the gluten, which takes several hours. So yes, I have used it. Sometimes I'll use it to make chicken, like the recipe that's on our YouTube page. Other times I use it as a binder. If I'm making like a meatloaf or something and I want it to hold together better, I'll put a little of the gluten in there. I don't have an issue with gluten at all, period, unless you are gluten allergic. And we're learning now that many people who are gluten sensitive may not actually be sensitive to the gluten, but are sensitive to the fact that it is genetically modified and not organic. And when you go and find the flours that are non-GMO organic, you don't have the allergic response. Okay. We're going to spray this little pan. And we're going to put this in here and cover it and bake it till it's done. Y'all see it? And you know, sometimes on Sabbath evening, you go back in the kitchen and get a little bit more of this in your plate. I long for it. So Dr. Christina, I want you to get the recipe out of the handout and make you some and compare it to the one that your mom used to make so that it'll taste like it. Make sure you're using the same seasonings that she's using compared to what the recipe is in the handout that I'm doing today. And all of these recipes are either from one of my cookbooks or we've used it for Message Magazine or created it in our clinic for our patients. What we're going to do now is cover this, put it inside of the oven with that lasagna and let it bake. It'll probably bake for about 30 minutes or so, just like this. Then I'll take the top off of it and let it brown. And we will have vegan cottage cheese loaf. Amen. Any questions? I thought there'd be more questions out of Christina. I really did.
I think they're just so mesmerized by what we're making that
they don't have one, huh?
Don't have any questions.
Okay, then. We good. All right, now, eggs is something that I never really liked. My mother, again, she was mothering the way that the government was telling her to mother. And if any of you have seen the movie What the Health, you have seen the doctor in there, Milton Mills. He's now become a good friend of ours. And in one of the conversations that we were having with him, he said that he had a patient he was seeing, and he was going over the history with her and everything and talking about some things that she could do to change. And she said she was allergic to milk. And he said, well, you don't have to drink milk. She said, but the government said I had to. And he said, what do you mean the government said? They said that I need to drink 2 servings of milk in order to be healthy. He said, that's not true. And so my mom raised us for a while not doing any of it. And then she went to making us eat the eggs and the milk and all of that stuff. And then as we grew older and did more study and more research became available, we discovered that that was something that we didn't need to do. My husband, and I never liked the eggs. I ate the cheese, but I didn't like the eggs and the milk. My husband, however, misses eggs. He misses them scrambled. He misses them in omelets. He misses the flavor of it. You know, when you make a salad and you cut up a boiled egg and put it on top of it, he misses that too. So making this egg salad was really something that he was happy to see. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. And this is something that we've done for the patients at the office as well. We're taking another package of this same old water packed tofu, and we're going to drain the water off, and then we're going to mash it.
I do have a question. Someone sent me a question on my phone.
Okay.
Why is there no vegan cheese in the cottage cheese loaf?
Because for my recipe, I didn't put cheese in it. Did your mama put cheese in hers?
Well, someone else was asking the question, but no, we never use cheese in ours. I figured that the tofu is the replacement for the cheese, right?
Tofu is a replacement for the cheese, and there may be some recipes where people add cheese to it too, but it wasn't in any other recipes I ever used. So if it had been in my original recipe, I would have added it. But the tofu is what you use in place of the cottage cheese. Right.
And I've never had real cheese, even in the vegetarian version.
No. It was cottage cheese. That was
right.
The dairy product that was in there. Now, in some of your veggie meatloafs that you were making out of the veggie burger or the ready burger, they may have put some grated cheese in that. But when it comes to cottage cheese loaf, it was cottage cheese loaf and special K. Those were the two main ingredients. And then there were variations on mushrooms and seasonings. And, you know, some people just didn't even play with the seasonings like I did. They would use a bag of Lipton onion soup mix, and that would season it for them. So there are a lot of varieties of it, but I never, ever have seen cheese in a cottage cheese loaf.
Yeah, a couple of people mentioned that they top it with vegan cheese.
Okay.
Someone else said that when the vegetarian version, they actually use cheddar cheese. So I guess maybe there are some variations out there.
Okay. And then that could be, if most of your viewers are from the Chicago, you know, Lake Region area, that may have been the way they did it there, which is very interesting to me, because we know as a people, having migrated from down here in the South, as we moved to different places, then we kind of adjusted some of the basic stuff based on the part of the world we were living in. So maybe that's the difference. But the ones that I grew up here in Huntsville, and the ones that I ate mimicked more like this. And then if you are a collector of Adventist vegetarian cookbooks, just go through those books, because I know if it's an Adventist cookbook, there's a cottage cheese loaf recipe in it somewhere.
Right.
Okay, so now I'm making this into egg salad. So we're mashing. For every recipe that I've done so far, we're just mashing it. That's it. And we have made this, and depending on the patient load, sometimes, you know, if it's a lower load, or if it's somebody who's really interested in making the changes, we'll make them a whole sandwich. But recently what we've done is like make an egg salad sandwich on one piece of bread and cut it triangularly, and then maybe add some grapes for them to taste. And then they come back the next day and want to know, can they have the other half of their sandwich, because they enjoyed it so much. And I think that's how it's supposed to be. Enjoyable, something that you notice a difference is happening in your life, and you want to share it with other people.
There's another question. What kind of tofu is that? Is that firm? Is it extra firm?
Good question. This is the firm, and I failed to mention that at the beginning. It usually comes soft, firm, and extra firm in the water packed, and in the silken it comes soft, firm, and extra firm. I usually stick with the firm for most of what I'm doing, because I play with it so much. I can adjust it and thin it down with water, or thicken it with cornstarch if I ever need to, but I haven't ever needed to. And then with the silken version, we're going to use the firm to make the cheesecake, or the extra firm, and I would use that in cheesecake or ice cream. Excuse me. And then I would use the soft in the salad dressing. And then, like, if all you can get, you know, don't go to the grocery store. She said we had to have soft for the salad dressing. If all they have is medium, get medium, add some water to it. Don't lose your mind because they don't have soft. But just know, if you're doing it with the water packed tofu, you're going to be able to taste a little difference on your tongue, because there's definitely a marked difference in that and the way that you're cooking it. Okay, so for this now, got to add turmeric. Have you seen the studies out of MD Anderson about turmeric?
I am a believer in turmeric. I recommend it to all of my patients as an anti-inflammatory agent. So yes, I love turmeric.
I was at the vegetarian conference at Loma Linda probably about 8 years ago now, and they had a presenter there. I cannot remember his name. He was East Indian, and he does a lot of the research at MD Anderson on turmeric. It's like a superfood. And he was telling us that in the lab, everything that he put it on, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, lupus, whatever, it helped tremendously. And you mentioned the fact that it's an anti-inflammatory. And when you read the Spirit of Prophecy, there's a lot of discussion about inflammation in the system, which actually ties into what's going on now with COVID, and so many of our people who were dying disproportionately from it, and the underlying illnesses were inflammatory diseases. And this is getting the biggest press because it's just so amazing. And when I tell people, if they're taking it, You don't have to take it as a supplement. You can eat it. You can make milk with it and pour it in a little juice if you want to, and put it in this. And when we do the tofu, we put it in that. You can eat with it and use the actual turmeric that is on the aisle where the spices are. You do not have to go to GNC or Whole Foods and buy those capsules. This is all you need to do. And sometimes if we're feeling a little sick or a little bug is coming on, we'll make up some nature's penicillin and add this turmeric to it, or mix some of this in orange juice or in milk and drink that. And the benefit is just tremendous. Okay, so now what you have is a tofu that has been mashed up, and now it has all this turmeric in it. So we've turned it yellow, and now we're going to season it. I have bell peppers and onions, and I like celery. And celery is one of those things that is extremely high in fiber, and it's really good to fight hypertension. And if this is not how you make your egg salad, then don't put this in your egg salad. You don't have to do that. You can just do what y'all do at your house for the egg salad. I have a friend in my cookbook. I use her recipe, and she was Caribbean, so she liked to put curry in her egg salad. And that's not something that I liked. I learned how to eat it, but you can do what you want. And if you don't want all that, you don't have to do it. The other thing that we like to do is to put green olives in our stuff. I'm good. I guess if I was a pathfinder, I'd have a knife in my pocket or something. And I like to use the Lindsay olive. A lot of the green olives that you're used to have the pimento in them, and they are often higher in sodium. So we like to buy the Lindsay olives and use those. And I wanted you to actually see that, so I didn't cut them up. The recipe calls for about 10 of them. We use these in our egg salad, and we use this in our potato salad. And my husband has become the potato salad connoisseur now. I don't make it anymore. He makes it, and it's really good. But if you don't like green olives, then don't use the green olives. We just enjoy them. I do know that a lot of people put pimento in their egg salad, and if you don't have enough pimento or they ran out of pimento, you can use red bell pepper just the same, and it's fine. Pimento is a type of pepper. Any more questions, Dr. Christina?
Just about the link to your cookbook, but I'm going to put that in the chat. Okay. So if you want the link to the cookbook, it's in the chat. Just since I'm mentioning this, as a reminder, the link to the recipes was also posted, and I'll post those again at the end, as well as a link to the evaluation for this program.
Good. And of course, this is our favorite brand, but you know, I remember Gwen Foster was giving a presentation one day. She was out in the community doing Bible work, and she got to a woman's house and was ready to do her spill, and the woman wasn't interested because something was going on. So Gwen pressed her and found out that her kids were coming home soon, and there was nothing that she had for them to eat. So Gwen went in the kitchen with her to see what she had, and she had some eggs, and she had some oatmeal. So Gwen showed her how to make oatmeal patties. And something else she found, and she was able to have dinner for her family when the kids got home. So, you know, we might have decided to take them somewhere to feed them or call somebody to do something, but she used what she had. And Jesus does that with us too. And so if you know, you're working with somebody, teaching someone, and I think that's the advantage of COVID, not being able to be at the campground, you are in your community now. And so whatever you're learning from me or the other presenters through your virtual camp meeting, you can go knock on your neighbor's door or call your grandmommy, or if you're taking care of your grandbabies, talk to their mom when they get there, or have some food ready for them, comparable to what you would have had to do if you were at camp meeting. You wouldn't have been able to do it until you got back. And this is a way for us to change the communities that we live in just by making little suggestions like this. And if there's a little store in the community, go to the store, use what they have. Okay, now we're going to add this. And then we like pickles in ours. And we recommend that you use a vinegar-free one if you can find one. And this is the Paz pickles that many of us grew up with. There's another brand called Bubby's that they sell in health food stores and grocery stores that is also available. And then for years, I made my own mayonnaise. But as we have moved into the clinic more regularly, I'm discovering that a lot of people are interested, but they don't want to make it. So we use the Helmets brand. There's another one called Just. I believe Aldi has a brand that is vegan, because what mayonnaise is pretty much eggs and vinegar and oil. And this one is made without. And then you can make your own from tofu or from garbanzo bean juice. Now, the secret ingredient that we discovered very recently is something called black salt. Have you used that yet, Doc?
I have. It smells so interesting.
My husband, when he makes a salad now, he will sprinkle some of this on there so that he gets the flavor of an egg.
The smell, though.
This is high in sulfur, so it's going to give you the taste and sensation of an egg. And that's what we have begun using an awful lot more in stuff. As a matter of fact, the first time that he made the potato salad, we had some family over here, and they put the potato salad on their plate, and then they tasted it, and then they put it back, and they said, I can't eat this because somebody has put some eggs in here. And we're dying laughing because we knew we had made it, but it tasted so much like there was egg in it that they weren't sure what to do with it. Okay, I'm going to put some McKay's in here and a little nutritional yeast flakes. And I was doing one of these recently, and I was telling the people, they were asking how much. The recipes that you have in your handout are your basic recipes to go by. But in our community, you don't never know who's going to be by the house, and you may have to add some more to something. And so that's why you see me sometimes just shaking and guesstimating, because of what I'm trying to do with the final product. Okay, now we're going to gently stir this, and we're going to have some egg salad to put in our sandwich. And the black salt, that is like, whoo. And so if you're doing parties as you start to get back together during the summertime, and you are yourself trying to eat more healthfully, these are options that you have. I know a lot of times in the past, people who were plant-based, even when my parents, I'm 62 years old, and my parents became vegetarian when I was right at a year, and none of their family members were. They weren't interested in it or anything. But as my parents continued to live it, my great-grandmother and my great-aunt started cooking stuff for them. So, they would typically have all the soul food stuff at the table whenever we went over, including all of the meat. But what they started doing was preparing versions of it for us. So they made cabbage and lima beans and rice, sweet potatoes and corn, stuff that we could eat that didn't have all the bad stuff in there. And there's always this running joke, if a vegan is coming over for dinner, my brother used to say, I don't want to have any grass and tree bark. But I hope what I'm showing you are appetizing, tasty options that you can provide so that your vegan or vegetarian guest, or even a person who's not necessarily vegan or vegetarian, but just want to make some more healthy choices, has the opportunity to make those choices. And then you could serve this and make it, nice and round and pretty. I think it needs something else.
When you finish, you bring it closer to the camera so you can see it.
I'm coming over. I'm adding some more nutritional yeast and some McKay's. And I keep my McKay's in a jar like this because I use it so often, rather than the glass jar that you buy it in.
There's another comment. Plant-based Karen says she actually lost over 60 pounds on a plant-based diet, and that is really awesome. Plant-based diets are definitely very, very healthy and help and aid in weight loss. So that's awesome, Karen.
Congratulations to plant-based Karen. That's pretty good.
I almost wish I could put my hand in the camera and take a little bit.
If we have smell-o-vision or taste-o-vision, right? There you go. So this will slide very nicely between some bread or on a bagel or a bun, or some lettuce and tomato if you want to, and a pickle on the side. Good to go.
Looks tasty. I'm going to make that next week.
All right, easy to do. And you don't have to make a double recipe if you don't want to. You can cut it in half and it'll be just fine. Any more questions about that?
There's a question about, and I don't remember this, but does black salt have sodium? I'm sure it does. I don't know how much it has, but what do you know about that?
I have not measured it. What I have found as I have begun using more natural salt, I use less of it.
Right.
Because traditional salt has sugar in it. Pick up your Morton or your store brand and read the label. There's salt, sodium chloride, and sugar. So you probably use a lot more of that to get the saltiness that you want. But if you're using pink salt, the Himalayan, or if you're using this, you don't have to use near as much of it because it is sodium chloride.
Right. Okay.
I've never measured it. Cooking with salt is something I haven't done in 25 years. I usually leave that to the end. Or like if I'm making mac and cheese, I'll put it in there. But like years ago, I would boil my pasta in salted water. You put salt in everything, and I don't do that anymore. But when I use salt, I try to use the Himalayan, or if I'm trying to get the eggy flavor, then I will use the black salt. And you can find the black salt in our community at the East Indian markets. Another question?
Yeah, I had to order my black salt off of Amazon because I couldn't find it anywhere. But yeah, you said the East Indian markets?
Yes, East Indian markets. And that's the other thing that I have begun recommending to people as well, especially as they come into our clinic. We're not supposed to get this, we're not supposed to get that. If you look culturally at people of color, whether they are African American, Hispanic, Caribbean, whatever, if they have a little brown on them, their cultural foods are primarily plant-based. They eat meat, but it's not the center of the meal. And what they have done, whenever they move into a community, they take control of what's on the shelving. I was on a call last week with the Slave Fruit Project, and Tracy McQuarter was on there talking about after the end of the civil rights, the government made a deal with Black communities, and they were offering to send food into the communities, and some of that food was the horrible food that we see now. And it may be that we're more susceptible to that because we didn't come to this country on our own, bringing what we knew from our home environments. But when you go to the Asian community, the African community, the Caribbean community, you're going to walk into their communities and find stores that support their cultural habits and cuisines. And when you go to those stores, you can get more fresh produce. You can get seasonings that you wouldn't normally find in the grocery store, and it's never as expensive in those stores as it is in the main markets. So yeah, experiment with those different cuisines and learn where they are in your community and go there and support them. This salt that's in this bag started out at like 89 cents the first couple times I bought it. And then I started sending people there. And I mean, there must have been going a lot because then the price went from like 89 cents to like $1.09 and maybe $1.29 because so many of us were buying it. And they have the best mangoes in town. I went to the Asian market to get the tofu yesterday, and they have this whole wall of fresh produce, all kind of stuff that you would want. And a lot of people now are using the oyster mushrooms and the king oyster mushrooms as a meat replacement. They had those there. Last year, I was looking for guava and I couldn't find any. I found it at the Asian market. And then there is a Caribbean African market on our side of town here in Huntsville, and they have everything, the yam, all of the seasoning that you would traditionally use, so much other stuff. So you can find it online, but if you have access to it in your community, I recommend that you go to the community stores where these people live and they're using this all the time, and you can get it from there.
All right, another question is, will that salt raise your blood pressure?
Well, anytime you're adding too much salt, of course, it's going to impact it. But one of the things that we enjoy showing our patients at the clinic who come in for hypertension or who've had a stroke or who have circulatory problems, my husband likes to pull out this picture that shows what a clogged blood vessel looks like, because salt impacts your pressure, but a meat diet also impacts the pressure. And when a blood vessel is lined with saturated fat and cholesterol, also known as plaque, that helps the heart to have to work harder, which means the pressure is going to go up. Elijah Saunders, who was a Black physician, hypertension specialist, he did a project with Caribbeans where their pressure was up, and he did not change. He didn't tell them to stop using salt or anything. What he decided to do was tell them to eat more fruits and vegetables. And as they ate more fruits and vegetables, their pressure started dropping. So what they were doing was they were eating more processed foods and less fresh fruits and vegetables, which of course are full of potassium. And as they begin to do that, the pressure normalized on itself. So we have been sold this story that salt is the primary thing, without telling you that the salt doesn't just come from their salt shaker. It's in milk and cheese and butter and ice cream and yogurt and all those things we like to eat. And when you take that out of the diet, you have removed a huge contributor of sodium. So do that. Increase your consumption of fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables where the sodium potassium is balanced so that your pressure comes down. Then do some lifestyle stuff. Get up off the couch, go outside and walk. Sitting in the sunshine is going to lower your blood pressure. If your pressure is up too high, you can come and take a foot bath, and that will help to open the blood vessel so that the pressure comes down. It's bigger than just salt.
Right. I think that the biggest, especially in the community where I work, it's all those processed foods are just horrible, but they're so convenient, and so people run to those more. But yes, getting away from those is definitely important.
And they're convenient because that's how we've made them to be.
Right.
Because when you raise in the South, and a lot of people who migrated, okay, I'm going to start the tofu now, the scrambled tofu. I'm just going to put these onions in here to start simmering. When you, all of us moved up north from the South, you still have connections with people here in the South who live like we live. And when I was a little girl, my parents, we were in Jersey City, and I'd go to my grandmother's house in the summertime, and I clearly remember hearing the fruit man driving down the street in Jersey City, and we were like across the bridge from New York. And in those communities in the city, they don't have the grocery chains and stuff, but they still have people who have these stands that have fresh stuff on there. So you make a decision. And when you do go to the grocery store, you shop on the outside corridor of the store. And if you're going down the aisles for anything, you're going to get rice and dry beans and pastas, stuff like that. You're staying away from the animal products, milk, cheese, eggs, butter, ice cream, yogurt, all of that. And you're staying away from the meat dishes. And then you're staying away from stuff that's real sugary. So you make a decision. And I remember the first trip, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was working for the Office of Nutrition for the state of Georgia. And we were traveling to promote the 5 a Day for Better Health program. And on this particular trip, this was the first trip I was taking after my diagnosis and deciding to go plant-based. And I'm like, I'm going to die before I get back home because there's not going to be anything there for me to eat. So when I got to the hotel, I checked in. Next morning, I come downstairs and there's this huge buffet. And for the first time in 30 some years, when I went to the buffet, instead of heading straight for the scrambled eggs and the biscuits and the potatoes, I took my time and I looked over it, and there was so much other stuff there that I had not paid attention to. Lots of fresh fruit. There was granola there. There was whole grain bread. There was oatmeal there. There were grits there that I had ignored because I was headed to the eggs with the cheese and getting an omelet and all that sort of stuff. So ask God to open your eyes to see what he's already provided for you, and then give you the power to make a decided effort to make different kinds of choices. And he'll do it. He's already got the answer for you. This is the last pack of tofu for today. And what I'm going to do is show you another way to scramble the tofu. My husband, like I said, has really enjoyed being able to have just egg, because he really misses the just egg, but I actually prefer scrambled tofu. All afternoon, we have been mashing the tofu in order to get it for the lasagna and for the Special K loaf and what we did for the egg salad. And you can do that very same thing to make your tofu, and it's going to be more like hard scrambled eggs. Or you can take the tofu and score it and then slice it like this. And then slice it like this so you have these little blocks. Well, I was online one day and I came across this teaching video that suggested that if you want it to look like soft scrambled eggs, you take the tofu, you drain the water, and you're literally going to cut it very thinly so that it comes off into these pieces that just kind of collapse, so that when you put it in the pan, it looks like you have soft scrambled eggs. So that's how I'm going to slice it this time. I have just some yellow onions sauteing and a little bit of olive oil. If you don't use oil, you can sweat them in a hot pan, or you can use a non-stick pan. I don't like non-stick pans because whatever they put in there to make them not stick, I don't trust. But I like to cook with cast iron skillets. And the more you cook on those and the more seasoned they become like a non-stick pan. And somehow God has made it so that when you heat that iron, it is absorbed into the food that you're eating. So like when I make this tofu and I cook it in there, it's going to pick up some iron. And if I were to add tomatoes to this or bell peppers to this, which are high in vitamin C, then that would help the iron to be absorbed in my body even more. This takes a little more time this way, but I was so pleased with the finished product. Because sometimes visual is what makes a difference. Because I've been doing this for years and I kind of have a little reputation, people show up at my house saying, I know you can make so-and-so, so that's what I want. But if you're talking to someone for the first time and they're not quite sure of it, making it look like what they're used to eating traditionally will probably pique their interest rather than just breaking something up and cooking it and say, hey, this is good for you. And they'll say, yeah, but it don't look good to me.
Do you mind holding that up to the camera so we can see how thin those slices are?
Let me check these onions. So at the front is how you can square it. But back here are these little wavy pieces. So it looks kind of like, once you have it all together, like the folds in a soft scrambled egg. And once I add the turmeric to it, it's going to turn it yellow. And then I'll season it. And then if you want to, you can add a little cheese to it, and that makes it look like a soft scrambled cheesy egg. That good?
Looks good.
Okay. So now I'm going to put it in the pan. And just like I did, what I'm going to do, I'll bring it over here so you can see me do it. I'm going to add some turmeric. And the more you add, the yellower it gets. I'm going to add some black salt. And this is just basic scrambled egg. We're not talking like with cheese or anything like that. I'm going to add some of Kelly's chicken style seasoning. And I'm going to add some nutritional yeast flakes. And that recipe is in your handout. It is also in the book, cooking up good health and still cooking up good health. And then I'm going to put this back on the stove, and I'm just going to start folding it in until this gets all mixed in, and then let it simmer. Now, a lot of times after I've done this, what I will do is add some cheese. I like to add cheddar and smoked Gouda, and sometimes pepper jack. And you can get either of those from Follow Your Heart brand. Sometimes what I'll do is saute some onions and bell peppers and mushrooms and tomatoes first, and then I'll add the tofu on top of that. And sometimes I'll brown a little veggie sausage or veggie ham, and then I'll add this way. And then you just literally let it simmer until it's heated through and the flavors blend. And then if there are any other seasonings that you or your family enjoy, typically in an egg, you can add it to this, and it will resemble that flavor and satisfy the desire that you have once you've let go of dairy products. Another question.
No, I was just going to say that the Gouda cheese from Follow Your Heart is very good.
Honey, my husband eats it by the slice. If I'm here making macaroni and cheese, he'll come in and say, "Have you already gotten yours out there?" I say, "Yes," and he starts peeling it off. It is so good. And Violife makes a good smoked provolone that's really good too. Really good. So you got those options. Okay, my peas look like they're done. Let's see what we got here. All I need is some cornbread and some rice to go with it. As the participants look at the recipes, and even you too, Dr. Christina, is there anything, because today I did what you and I had talked about originally, is there anything that someone is interested in seeing me make that is not on the list, or that they have a specific interest in that I might be able to add?
Yeah, if anyone, that's a good question. If you guys want to see anything in particular over the next couple of days, please go ahead and put that in the chat, and then I'll make note of that and pass that on to Donna so that she can think about incorporating that over the next couple of days. I know we're looking forward to tomorrow and Friday. Do you want to give us a preview of what's going to be happening on tomorrow, what you're going to be cooking
tomorrow? We're going to make cheesecake, and we're going to make strawberry topping using fruit juice to sweeten it, and we're going to make whipped topping from garbanzo bean juice, and then we're going to make some brownies using carob instead of chocolate, because chocolate is full of caffeine that's really not good for your brain.
Right. Carob help is very good. Also good for helping keeping you regular as well.
Yes, high in calcium. Okay, so now I'm going to season these with some McKay's.
Someone asked, can you make some oat patties?
You want to see oat patties? Okay.
That's what someone put in the, someone will ask, are any of your recipes going to have TVP?
No.
Okay. So maybe
use some meat from the Asian market on Friday.
So it looks like somebody wants to see oat patties.
Okay.
Nicole Smith. Yeah, someone else said oat patties.
Okay, so it must mean oat patties. How about that?
Plant-based carrot said oat patties.
Okay, plant-based carrot.
And someone said they can't wait for plant-based carrot. Also says she can't wait for the greens.
Okay, here are the black-eyed peas that were cooked in the Instant Pot in an hour. Onion powder, garlic powder, a bay leaf, and some bacon. And when they came out of the pot, I added some McKay's chicken style, which of course you're going to use less of, because now you're actually tasting the beans and not the bean water. These have not had any additional oil to them. That is an option for you if you want to add it, but you don't have to. Easy peasy, 60 minutes in the Instant Pot, and they're nice and tender. If you wanted them a little firmer, you could probably cook them for about 50 minutes and they'd be just fine. So this bean is to us what soybeans are to Asians, all made by the Creator God, all good for us. In the Bible, there is no prohibition of the plant foods that we can eat. Avocados, coconuts, palm fruit. He did not say that you can only eat this. He told them not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because of what was going to happen that we're living through. But there was no prohibition. He said you can eat of every fruit, nut, grain, and vegetable. The prohibitions came when he introduced meat to the diet, where you could only eat clean animals. And of the clean animals, you were never to eat the blood and never to eat the fat. That was an abomination unto you. In Proverbs, he says that you can eat honey, because many vegans don't believe in eating honey because it's connected to the animal and the processing of it. But that's because they are making sacred the animal and its health. But the Bible says, eat honey, for it is good for you. And we know that there are a lot of health benefits that are found in honey that are for prevention of disease and helping in restoration from disease. So any fruit, any nut, any grain, any vegetable, if you haven't moved to plant-based, only clean meat that does not have fat or blood, meaning that it has been prepared in a kosher way, which also means that if they're taking the fat and the blood out of it, you shouldn't go buy it in your milk and your cheese and your eggs and your butter and your ice cream, because that ain't nothing but solid fat. And then if you want to drizzle a little honey on something, John the Baptist was running around eating locusts and honey. And we believe that the locust that he was eating was the locust bean, which is carob bean and honey. So there you have it.
Great. Those beans look awesome.
Aren't they, girl? My husband came home. I know he's gonna come in here in a few minutes and try to decide, can I have beans or can I have?
Right, and those were dry beans, correct?
From dry. A pound of dry beans. And if you don't have the Instant Pot, Dr. Christine and I both have one, and it was one of the best investments we got it right before COVID. You can put it in a crock pot overnight, or you can soak them put them in it, wash them out, put them in a pot, bring them to a boil, cut them off, let them soak for about an hour, and then just cook them slowly on top of the stove the way that you used to cook them. And then do your seasoning, more of it at the end, so that you get the full flavor. And every single bean has its own unique flavor that you're missing because we're used to having the fat or the smoke on the tongue.
Right.
There's a way for you to get to know the bean. And we don't want you to lose your health over not eating beans. We know what happened in the Bible with Jacob and Esau. And it was a bowl of lentils that they had that, exchange over. We want you to go shop around the edges and then go down the aisle where the beans and rice are and get them. Black beans, red beans, lentils, kidney beans, pinto beans, whatever kind. And all of them usually take about the same amount of time to cook unless they're small. And then season them how you want. There may be a recipe in one of your handouts, I'm not sure, but I know in one of the books there's a recipe for what's called Texas caviar, which is a host of beans in a cold salad. I use black-eyed peas, black beans, red beans, and pinto beans with onions and bell peppers and salsa and tomatoes and chilies, and I season all that together, and that is absolutely delicious. So that's another way to eat something that's a part of our culture and not have to cook it. You just eat it with tortilla chips, and that's another option for you too.
Good. I have a few questions and comments. One is, thank you for the suggestion about not adding the salt until the end, because I know for me, I'm always adding the salt to my beans. So now I'll have to try this method of adding it at the end. So that was awesome.
And I didn't put any salt in here at all. All I used was McKay's.
Right, which has some sodium in it.
Right.
How much water did you put in the beans was a question that Denise.
A pound of beans inside of the Instant Pot, it was 1 pound of beans, 6 cups of water.
So 1 pound.
That's because I like a thicker gravy. If it didn't matter, I would probably have added about 7 or 8 cups, and then they would have cooked well, but it would have been a thinner sauce. This way, as they cooked and the starch was released into the sauce, it thickened it up, and we like a thicker gravy.
So 1 cup of beans to 6.
No, 1 pound. 1 pound of
1 pound
to 6 cups of water.
Okay. And then someone asked about, are you going to make a cake?
Yes, we're going to make the cake on Friday.
And then, oh, what'd you say?
They didn't see that coming.
And then the other question was, what's wrong with TVP, or is there something?
There's nothing wrong with TVP. TVP is what is the least processed of the vegetarian meat substitutes. So they make this gluten, they dry it out, and then they grind it up. Or they make the gluten and they shape it into veggie chicken or veggie fish. So the TVP is the basis. It's textured vegetable protein that has been crumbled or made into chunks. I just don't use a lot of it. That's all. It's nothing wrong with it at all. And I think part of the reason is because I'm in mainstream with these patients, and you often find that more at health food stores than you would in a traditional grocery store. And I don't want them to be running all over town when they can reach in the freezer section and get something that is TVP as well, but it's in another format.
Right. Someone said, can you make your rolls?
Who is the someone? That's someone who knows me.
Carol McCullough.
I actually thought about it, but it's going to take a full 3 hours. So I don't know how I could do that. Through.
Okay. I know we only have a few minutes.
If I started it before we logged on, but then you would miss it because it takes a full 3 hours to make the roll. So
wow.
But on Friday, when we do the cake and the mac and cheese, that can be done within the 2 hour time.
Okay. I know we're almost wrapping up here, and we've been so excited. I know all of us are super hungry now and don't know what we're going to eat when we get off of this. Oh, that looks great.
There we go. We good?
It looks awesome.
Okay, I'm gonna put it back in there for a few more minutes while the meatloaf is finishing up too.
Someone's telling us not to go, but we'll be back tomorrow. Invite your friends.
This is a special K loaf that is not browned yet, but it's brown on the bottom. So we're gonna now cover it and let it brown.
Someone asked, do you have any casserole recipes? Do you have some of those in your book?
Yes, there are casserole recipes in the book. And if you want, you can buy the first book, Something to Shout About. This is the one that I wrote in '99, and it has my testimony in it, tips on healthy living, and about 100 recipes. This was right after I came from Wildwood and had gone in my kitchen to, make an offering to Jesus. And this is what I came up with this. The second book, Cooking Up Good Health, was written after I spent some time working professionally in Atlanta, and I kept running into people. We'd be at Morehouse and we'd be sampling food. And one day the president of Morehouse came through and we had made a vegan banana pudding, and he tasted it and he kept walking. And about 10 minutes later, he said, wait a minute, what was that? I need some more of that. And so those people were asking me for our traditional recipes. So that's what's in that book. And it complements the cooking show that is on our YouTube channel, which is Cooking Up Good Health on Lifestyle Therapeutics. Then the third book, which is an ebook called Still Cooking Up Good Health, has lots of tips on healthy living, links to health professionals. There's plans in there that you can follow to improve your health. There's meal plans. There are grocery lists and links to cooking demonstrations that are a part of that on top of the recipes where I have added casseroles and soups and those sorts of things. So you have 3 options, and they're all at the link that she has put in the chat.
And I have the pink book.
Okay.
And I have to look for the rolls in there.
Okay.
And I just posted the link again to your books in the chat.
Okay.
So you'll find that there.
Is there somebody else on there that knows me that I can't see who got something? That's when you try to do this for Dr. Christine, and then y'all show up changing the plans.
Right. Everybody has said that this was such a wonderful, wonderful show. And they really enjoyed it. I have one other question someone sent me, is what about soy curls?
Yes, I have used those too. I find that soy curls are the whole soybean, the way that they have manufactured those. And you often treat them like you do TVP. And I grew up seasoning it by making hot water that's already flavored and then putting the TVP in there so that it absorbs the flavor. And I do the same with the soy curls, but it didn't act the same way. So what I have decided to do is to cook it into. So if I'm going to make like a stew or something, I'll put it in there dry and let it cook into the broth. If I was doing curry or if I were making soup, so that as it starts to hydrate, it is also simmering at the same time. And that has turned out well. And then one time I saw some recipe where you breaded it in something and fried it, and my husband just demolished it. So yeah, I use the soy curls. And the advantage of the soy curl over some of your other veggie products is that it's the whole soybean. As is with tofu, it's the whole soybean. So you're going to keep some of the fiber in it compared to the gluten or the TVP, where they've extracted the protein from the whole grain.
Right. Yeah. I made once orange chicken. Yes. It was a lot of work, but I made it for my son, and he really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do that. And if you do, somebody asked a question about the instant gluten. If you make instant gluten, you literally can season the broth that you hydrated with whatever you want it to taste like. And I'm learning so much. I was talking to my friend yesterday. Growing up in this culture, the way that we learned about gluten was our moms or grandmas or aunties made it, but it was like Thursday night in preparation for Sabbath, so we'd have chocolates. But a lot of people now in their own home kitchens are experimenting with it, and they're creating some amazing stuff. One of the things is if you make your gluten from scratch, and you wash it out and let it sit, instead of hurrying up and slicing it and putting it in the broth, let it sit for about an hour, and the actual protein develops more. Then you can stretch it out and braid it up or knot it. And then if you're going to bake it or boil it, just simmer it. And when that's done, you literally pull it apart and it has shreds in it like chicken. So there are those options. People are coloring it with beet powder. One group of women is washing the gluten out and saving the starch water. We used to let the starch water go down the drain. They're saving the starch water and making other things from the starch water so that they're not losing any of it. So there's so much more. They're just getting ready to make some chocolates for the, the potluck.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for today. I just can't wait to see what we're going to cook tomorrow. Someone commented that this class should have been in person, so we could have tasted the food. I agree. We're going to have to make a trip down to Huntsville.
Come on.
We can eat some of that food, because maybe you can mail us some.
Something. I need to do something, huh? But there are enough of my friends up there who know how to do this. Call them.
Well, definitely hook us up with them so we can go over to eat for dinner.
Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today. We have learned so much. I just want to tell you that we'll be on tomorrow again at 3:00 p.m. Central Time. Please share this so those who have missed it, they can watch it later, and also let them know about tomorrow so they can join tomorrow or Friday when we're going to be cooking Sabbath dinner. So we thank you again for joining us. We hope that you have a wonderful afternoon. Be blessed. We'll see you again tomorrow afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye.